Okay, we might as well get started. Thank you for tuning in and checking us out with our Breadboard to Marketplace series. If you're liking what we're doing, just hit the like and subscribe and that notification bell in YouTube to be informed of every time we upload a video. We're moving quite a bit along in this series. We've got parts on order. So that's what we did in the last video, the last stream. So now we're going to play a little bit of catch up on some of the documentation and paperwork. This is going to be the boring, not so fun stuff. But again, we can't do much until parts arrive anyway. So we might as well get caught up on some of the stuff that we've been forgetting about. So I went ahead and double checked our project Kanban board here. Everything's looking good. Since this is specific to this project, we're going to be doing the requirements documentation, things like this, mainly the test requirements. We'll also include any results files, artifacts from the tests. So out of curiosity, I went ahead and went into the system and updated, like I said I would, updated the purchase orders to reflect all the proper parts, cleaned all that up, got it set up. So let's see if manufacturing, SMT level. So it's acting like they're available. Okay, forecast report, because now they're on order. I don't know why it's complaining about this. Oh, I might have to fix the bombs. So I noticed a couple of part numbers were wrong. So I might have to go through and fix the bombs because these were on the bombs. Let's make sure it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I'll have to go in and update and just fake an inventory on these guys. So, in fact, that's what we'll do here in a second real quick before I forget. Okay, so something is wrong because that was on order. 4 circuit. Let's get you an open new tab. Mauser. Circuit. Forgot to throw that on here. The 4 circuit and I think I ordered 50 of those. Let me double check. And this is what happens when you get ahead of yourself and you're not paying attention to what you're doing sometimes. History, look at this. Boom. I think I got 50 of those connectors coming in, those terminal blocks. No, I only got 10 of them coming in. 10, all right. Yep. All right. Now, if we manufacturing assembly level. All right, so that. Okay, so we don't. So what we're going to do is say this is one of those things I want to make sure that. Okay, that's not available because that's actually a separate work order. That's technically not available because that's a separate work order. But let's go ahead and do these connectors. Inventory. So one of the important things to do is to make sure that we are kind of caught up on some of the things. Jumpers on hand. So we are going to inventory. We should here. There should be a way. So put away rules. And should be able to adjust the because we should be able to adjust the quantity on hand. No. Oh, okay. Let's go to 20. And okay, so we got 20 on hand. So let's see here then. If jumper. Okay, now it's showing they're available. Oh, okay. That is a through hole, 20 on hand. We're going to say 50. We're going to go back to products. Okay, so we got 50 on hand. Because again, these are going to be the breakaway headers. All right. Okay, good. So it's acting like they're available because they're on PO, but that's because it's a forecasted report. So that's there. That's the fan, same thing. Now it's giving errors on these two parts, probably because something has changed in the BOM. So what we're going to do then is go into the BOM. CT level assembly. Bill of materials. So let's see here. What is giving us this problem? Let's see here. So we need 4 of those. All right, let's make sure. CC 1210. Let's delete that out of the BOM. And add 5 of those. Yeah, something changed somewhere. I think I had a problem. And let's get rid of this line. No. We're going to go to manufacturing orders. That is the ABX5R. Oh, these criminy 226010. There we go. Now we should update that BOM. SMT level. Update BOM. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so something had to have changed. No, why in the world is it saying that's not available? Did I forget to throw that on the I could have forgotten to throw that on the purchase. Is that Mauser? CC capacitor chip 1210. I might have forgotten to throw that on the bomb. We want to make sure all this is right. And let's see. 963. I ordered 40 of those. And okay. Yep. These are items I forgot to throw on here. As A1-ERM. Wait a minute, that won't be on here. I bet you that's the my DigiKey orders. Let me see here. GRM 15, GRM 188 or 6A226 ME 5D. All right, so that's what's wrong, and that's on the DigiKey. So let's go back here. All right, so that should be on the DigiKey. It's because I never actually officially added those parts. So let's go inventory. It's important to make sure you have all your ducks in a row with this stuff. I was hoping to move on to other stuff, but it looks like I have other things I need to fix first. That is the 22 UF 603. All right. So purchase, add a line. DigiKey Corporation. And cut tape. Save that. And let's make sure we have that on the DigiKey. Delete that. Now we're going to go to this guy, purchase. We're going to add DigiKey. and put its DigiKey part number in. Let's save that. Okay. And how many to order? 10. At and I change its state. You cannot delete it. I wonder if I can. Did you? All right, let's see here. Can I? No, something's wrong there. Interface IC 10. That shouldn't have that part number. That should be the part number. Can I? Set that to 0. Will that allow that state? Yes. All right. So set that to 0. Okay, so that should fix that. So if I go back to here. Good. Okay. All right. So it's not showing as forecasted. Okay. Thank goodness. Okay. My mistakes. I think I'm just trying to do too much at once. That's my fault, my bad, my mistake. So we got that kind of cleaned up. It's still in the order, manufacturing orders are in draft format. We'll solidify that more once we actually receive the parts and kind of figure out. That way we can throw off the time scales in here, even though it doesn't really matter. This is just for example, but you know, normally you'd have a better planning, understanding of your forecast when parts are coming in and everything. But it can be overwhelming for just one person to do it. So we have that. So our purchase orders are in order now. So we just have to wait for materials to come in before we can check them in. So one of the things we should do is now do the budget. And this is where we're going to kill ourselves here. So let's... So we don't have project investigation because we already did that. So we're going to start entering the items of what we bought. So PCBs, 10. They were 8.11. So 8110. Stencils. Let's see. Top stencil. 1. All right. And what is it? 1543. Bottom stencil. 1. And we should also PCB shipping. 83. Because that's all expenses. We have to PCB tariffs. Oops. 1. I probably spelled that wrong. Duty fee fine. I'm actually pretending I know how to spell tariff. Now, let's see here. Sum of E10 through E500. Should be catching that. Why aren't you catching that? Oh. Some. Let's see if. Oh. Format error. That was my fault. Okay. And that's slowly getting in the budget we allocated ourselves. And that's just the raw PCBs. Now, let's see here if I can find. I don't need the order details. I want the total invoice so I can see. All right. Mauser. Components. 1 fee. Yeah. I don't. So let's see here. I can't remember what the shipping charge was. I think it was like. Let's figure that out here in a minute. UPS. It was like $10.99. And duty fee. 1. Scroll down to the bottom of that order. Yeah. Now, DigiKey. One, and 2. One, and that is and there's no duty fortunately for those parts. Forgot to include that. So let's see if I can look at. Let me look at the invoice here. Should be taxes. Okay, here. We're going to insert a row above here. Let's drag that down there. PCB. Taxes. Right? So that's taxes. So let's drag you down in here. And then Mauser. All right, let's see here. Because I paid taxes on that. Trying to figure out what they were. I may have to end. I think I'll get some paperwork with the order when it comes in, and I can just go through that. Because I did pay the sales tax on this. I have to double check, but we'll find that out. I'm going to insert row above. Clean this up a little bit. Access 1. I don't know how much it is. Extended as well. Copy down. All right. But we've been eating away at a project budget. That's one of the things I wanted to really make sure that I informed of when we started this project in the get-go. This isn't cheap anymore. If you'll bear with me 1 second, I'm gonna look. So some of the parts I know. Let me find the ESP32. So I did a project. I was working on something last year. Let me see if I can find it. So ESP32. Let me find it. Okay. Well, there's that. Let me see if I can. History. Okay. I'm just going to blip through to see if I can find any. Okay, so that one. It's not August or either last year or earlier this year. I'm trying to find the last time I ordered the ESP32s. Because these are the same ones I used in another project a while ago. Something I was testing out. This might be that order. Let's see here. Okay. Wow. All right. Just to put in this perspective. So, what year? This was in 24, right? Last year. Okay. So the same ESP32. All right. I paid $268 each. All right. And now we paid $671 each for them. And that's just the raw price of the ESP32 that's gone up since last year. Since when I ordered those parts last? Wow. Actually, almost exactly a year. This was December of 24. For another project I've been working on my own as well. So in just a year, the parts have, just increased naturally. Let's see here. Even kind of compare, let's look at the USB UART interface. It's gone up a little bit. The driver chip. Because this board should be the same thing. It's 504 there. Got a little bit overpriced, so it went down a little bit, which is kind of surprising. But let's see here. Because I can swear those just to take a quick gander. The opticouplers went up in price too. See if I can find them really quick. Yeah, it's just insane. Where are you at, opticouplers? 53 cents each. Or yeah. So they went up a couple of a little bit. And then with the tariffs added on top of that, of the price increase that already just happened, yeah, things have definitely gotten more expensive. Just the raw price of the ESP32s. So yeah, it definitely is getting more expensive to do any kind of even hobby work in this climate right now, this economic climate. And it's just a wonder that anything's still moving. I mean, I know companies have to keep moving and try to get projects done and get products on the shelves, but this is just insane. Talk about inhospitable. So we got the budget updated. Just make sure we keep everything here. Because if you're running a normal project, doing this, even for an internal project for your company, as you grow, you definitely need to keep track of what you're spending, what you're doing. Make sure you don't overextend yourself. At some point in time with a project, you have to look at it, look how it's going. And sometimes you just have to decide to cut and run. That the project isn't going where you want it to, isn't going where you need it to, it's not doing what you want it to do. How much money do you want to throw at it to get it to work right? Sometimes it's best just to cut your loss and run, or to shelve the project for down the road when the climate can change, technology adapts, or something else happens. Sometimes stubbornness just to get a project accomplished. But typically, before you even kick off a project, there would be a good review. You would do a market analysis, a project analysis. You wouldn't just jump into something. This is something I've been kind of wanting for myself anyway. I didn't see anything on the market that did this already, what I'm trying to accomplish with this. And I figured make a project out of it, something I could package and even sell to recoup all my efforts into. And it'd be a good show of what's involved with actually trying to run your own company of electronics design and manufacturing. There's just a lot involved. So we've got the budget caught up. Fortunately, we're still okay. I did allocate, $2,000 for this budget for what I'd be willing to spend total on this. And again, this project may not even be ready to release for another year, till this time next year. So we might be on this journey together with these videos the whole other year. Electronics projects can take time because there's testing I want to do. I need to do a bunch of in-house testing. Some of it may be destructive. So the plan would be, actually let's go through this, which is some of the other documentation I want to get caught up on besides, the budget and fix my mess ups in Odo. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to code. So I started doing a lot of stuff in VS Code only because, it's a free application. I wanted to create an environment to where you didn't have to have a huge investment in software to even think about starting a project like this. Like, you are a hobbyist, you've got an idea on a breadboard, you want to see it through and try to make a project out of it. Try to actually make a product you can sell on Amazon, Etsy, eBay, through like a Shopify store, whatever, however you want to try to sell it. I may even get my Shopify store back up and running once I get this ready to sell and sell it through there. I have an account on Amazon. I have a seller's account. I might throw it on there as well. Maybe even Etsy and eBay. I don't know yet. But so here we back are in here. And while working with markdown files is easy, again, it's freely available. You've got VS Code, I think even for Linux, and I think even for Apple, if I'm not mistaken, iOS. So it's an easily accessible interface that anybody can use. And the markdown language is well documented. There's plenty of websites that explain all the formatting, all the different symbols and everything else. And even ChatGPT or Copilot will help write markdown files. as long as you tell it you're trying to do markdown files. But to be honest, sometimes this, once it's formatted like properly, it looks really nice. Like over here, so the preview pane, it looks really nice. But over here, it looks like just slop. And my mind has a hard time working with this. But we will try to work with it as much as possible. Now, I'm not too nuts on how of using CSV files for things like this. To be honest, I'm not. The good thing is programs like LibreOffice, I think there is even a Linux install for this. I think you can even get this for Linux, maybe even iOS. I'd have to double check. So don't quote me on any of that. But I know there are other free Office applications that can work with the Microsoft format. Because no matter how much we like to try to ignore that, the Microsoft applications dominate the industry. They're just everywhere you go. Most major corporations, especially once once you're in over 10, 20, 30, 40 employees, they're using Microsoft Office. They're using big name applications. They're paying for the subscription fees or the license fees or whatever. They're not using free applications. It's just these programs, these companies have embedded themselves as basically standards in the Office environment. And there's a lot of reason for it. And it kind of falls back to the same thing you run into with parts. For as much as I like the LibreOffice project and what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish, they could stop doing it anytime. Something could happen. They may end up not supporting it. Somebody may not end up picking it up. How are they going to look within 5 years, 10 years? Will their software still work properly? Will they still be available? So those are business decisions you have to make moving forward. Me personally, I've got an Office subscription. I have just the applications. I don't have Office email address. I have a family plan for myself and my wife, and we use the Office, the Word, Excel, and it's pretty good. It just comes back down to trying to use low cost or free applications. That's why I'm saving everything in Excel format or even like a Word doc format. So that way it can be opened up in Word or Excel down the road, maybe some minor file conversion, and you're not going to lose anything. You'll have the complete portability with it. So yeah, CSV files are nice, but they're hard to follow. And they're really, I like the column format, especially with spreadsheets. Be able to just create all these columns and stuff. And I like the clean interface of an actual document editor. So for some of this stuff, since LibreOffice is so available, I will just start converting some of it to LibreOffice and get away from the markdown files. They're great, but again, they're just something that's really difficult to actually work with. Some stuff we'll just go and keep in here, like the SOPs and stuff, because when I move over to my other videos, we will use Word and Excel to create actual, QMS documentation and other documentation. I'm just going to go and keep going with most of this in Markdown format for this series. And the good thing is be able to be pulled into Word and Excel. So what we need to do then is figure out some of the processes, especially operating procedures, for the QMS side. So we've got a few things we'd want to make sure that we're kind of following from a QMS ISO standard. One of them is, so I do use Copilot only because it's a great tool and it will help format and write this stuff. So let's go back to here. Okay, so what we need, since we ordered parts, one of the things we need to do is have like an incoming inspection procedure. Okay. So basically, incoming inspection. It hooks into ISO. Let's see here. There's a lot into this. It's still drafting it up. So typically what incoming inspection is it's exactly as it sounds. So when you have materials coming in through any vendor, any supplier, no matter what they do, even if they just make labels for your products, like a company like Cubison. Again, so I'm going to mention names, series resources, and products and services. Again, I am not sponsored by any of them. I am not endorsed. I am not receiving payment for anything. I am not trying to push them on you or say, hey, these are the companies you have to use. These are just companies and services I have used over the years. They have proven themselves to be reliable, good sources of information and products. And they are professional companies. This is what they do. They deal with, our industry. So one of them is Cubison. So they make custom designed overlays for like button membranes. They make custom design and printed like labeling for your product out of material other than just plain paper labeling. So I'm just gonna show you basically product identification and stuff. Nameplates, labels, overlays. So these guys make all kinds of things, and they'll work with you using a file. But the main point, let's get back to the point, get away from this tangent. I always seem to do that, is when these products come to you, you've obviously sent them specifications. You want these labels, these overlays to be XY dimension. They're using these colors with this adhesive. So you want to check what you got. You want to verify that what you got actually meets what you actually ordered, and it's a requirement in ISO. It's part of the traceability requirements. So yeah, so it just wrote a very big, drafted up a very big SOP for incoming inspection, because it's actually a very important part. Because you want to check your certificates. Let me come down here. So, what we're going to do is under SOPs, we're going to new file. We're going to name it what it named it. Zero one. Coming inspection. Now we're going to copy what Copilot gave us. And we're going to clean it up a little bit, kind of make sure everything makes standard person incoming inspection materials, document version 1, today's date. No, 11/6, it's not even today's date. Wow. All right, so it's way off already on that. I think Copilot's hallucinating what the date is, and that's even scarier. So let's kind of go through it a little bit. Define the standardized process. So that's the purpose of this, and dispositioning. So that's another thing. So because what I did was with Copilot was I kind of start asking about, this video series to help me kind of lay it out and organize it and do things like this, is automatically tying everything to that one project. So this is one of the things we need to go through and clean up. So it's not incoming materials used in any products by our company. Our company here. So again, we have a generic company name. If you were to actually kind of pull these down and modify them for your use, just make sure you go through and kind of clean this stuff up. So dispositioning is actually a very important thing with ISO and other QMS type systems. Is if you have a product that you receive from a manufacturer that does not meet your specifications, that doesn't meet the drawing that you sent to them, or the dimensions, or something's wrong with it, it's damaged, it looks wrong, whatever, you have to disposition it properly, which usually means, first of all, it needs to be isolated from the good material. It needs to be segregated. You are not to mix in bad, faulty products with production materials. Even if it means you have to isolate a whole entire batch, like a whole order of this stuff because there's a problem, while you work on resolving it. So you can so it needs to be set aside, and a special process gets kicked off for basically disposition resolutions. And that's a whole other animal. And so what's funny is a lot of these processes kick off additional documentation requirements, basically artifacts. Again, a lot of people like to say that the new ISO standard doesn't focus on documentation. No, that's wrong. It doesn't directly focus on documentation like a lot of the prior revisions did. But just because you have a new revision doesn't mean the old requirements go away. And it doesn't mean that you don't need to hold on to documentation anymore. That doesn't go away. The 2015 revision that is currently in effect for ISO 9001 it adds more focus towards customer satisfaction. So it adds additional requirements for that, for making sure that your customers are happy, you're resolving their problems quicker, you're documenting and retaining artifacts for that documentation. Basically, how did you resolve a problem? Was the customer satisfied? Did you follow up? Things like that. But the old requirements of needing the artifacts never went away. So anything that causes you to perform an action that especially kicks off a process of documenting, you should have either an SOP for or a work instruction for. So under this SOP, there might be a work instruction. We might have to kick off a work instruction for some of these, maybe, but I'm definitely going to have a work instruction for dispositioning, unfortunately, because that could be a whole other process in itself. So, okay, applies to all. And so the scope of what this process is, Okay, so roles and responsibilities, this outlines, that's why I like the ISO system, the QMS system, because it leaves nothing to chance. There's nothing to argue. Who's responsible for what? And that's what I love about it. So, unfortunately, a one-man team, you're the one responsible for it all. So, this is just fluffy, what do they call it? Text. I can't remember what it's called. Just fluff text. It just enhances the look. But if you grow a company, this will grow, and you will have employees that hopefully match some of these things. So yeah, so it follows on right here. One of the things I was trying to fix. Make sure, you know, all your POs and everything are right. Make sure everything's correct. All right, so receiving technicians, so whoever actually does the work, required documents and tools. Here we go. Notice how this refers to the approved suppliers list, which we started. So we are going to change that to master supplier list. But you know what? We can. I'm kind of, you know, let's close some of these things here. I don't like that. Let's close that. Let's just focus on that. Get away. All right. Parts naming conventions. We'll come back and close you up later. All right. We'll focus on a more narrow thing. So approved supplier list. I kind of like that better. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename that. And let's open it up. And we're going to fix this later. Again, why I'm not too big on markdown files. But what's great is when we're to the point where we want to, where we think we're done with this, there's another plugin and another extensions. Markdown PDF. I would definitely recommend doing that, installing that extension, because what that'll allow you to do is, I think you just right click over here. Right click. Yeah, so inside here you would right click, Markdown PDF export. Click on that. Just kind of show you how cool this is. So, okay. So it threw it in the folder, in the working folder. QMS, that should be approved supplier list. So right here. So what's cool about that is then you can start generating, you can use the VS Code basically for version control while this is multi-step. And then for point of use, which we'll cover, we should cover later, or a central, easily to access repository of files for like employees or even for your quick reference. You have a PDF here. So this is what's kind of cool is it shoves it down into a formatted version of the Markdown file. So that's what's great about it. So that plugin is really great. So then it'll look closer to what you see over here in the preview pane. So this will just be for like actually housing and doing all your control, your document control. Because if you're doing something and using like GitHub to hold this stuff for you, obviously you can control who has access to develop, to modify files. So version control or document access controls is a big thing too with ISO. You want to make sure nobody has the ability to change anything that they're not supposed to. All right. So make sure that's saved. So incoming inspection. So it calls for that approved suppliers list. So there's a non-conformance and log. So there's a log we'll have to generate. Tools. So it calls for calibrated tools. So that's another thing with ISO is I can't remember the exact, again, that's why another reason I'm using Copilot is there's so many clauses, so many things called out. And having tools that are properly calibrated is one of them. Welcome another expense. So if you're going for ISO certification, you also now have to pay to have your any tool or piece of equipment that is involved with interacting with a product that's going to be shipped out the door. So say a power supply and a digital multimeter. You now have, if they are used in testing, like final testing before you package up the product and ship it out to a customer, that power supply and that digital multimeter now has to be calibrated. And you have to have traceability for it. You have to have artifacts. And it's typically like a NIST traceable certification. And there's companies that specialize in calibration. And it's not cheap. Again, welcome another expense. That's why a lot of companies try to avoid ISO as much as they can, especially with manufacturing, because there's all this stuff and they're not optional. If you want to become actually ISO 9001, with design certified, you can't, and you have an auditor come through and looks at your manufacturing process. If you don't have records of calibration for your equipment that's used in actual production, that's a no. That's a negative. You're dinged for that. And then your supporting documentations. So like if we're getting, let's say, circuit boards, incoming inspection. So we would have our specs on our PCB. Generally for us, we can use, what's an ODO? So we can go to here. Let's go to here. So here, they'd be able to say, okay, right here, they'd be able to get all the basic dimensions. They'd be able to look at it. I know here it says Hazel PB free, but it's going to actually be Gold ENIG. That's technically an upgrade. So I'm not going to worry about changing it because Hazel PB free, lead free is basically a lower standard than immersion gold and nickel gold. But right here we have, our other basics. It's it's going to have green solder mask, white silk screen. The thickness is going to be a critical, and your outside dimensions, 120 by 85 millimeters, are going to be your criticals. So those you would use like a set of calipers or a large ruler to measure. And yes, calipers and rulers do get calibrated as well, because technically, even at this stage, that is a tool that's used on a production product. So yes, calipers and rulers do get calibrated. And believe it or not, yes, they do calibrate rulers. You can actually buy them pre-calibrated with the certificate that's good for, I think, a year. So again, welcome to the expense. So we would make sure of that incoming. So you have, it even lines out the workflow. So here's where you can kind of decide things. So this could be a work instruction. You can leave it in here as part of the SOP, or you can make it a work instruction, because your typical documentation is that if it's an SOP, should be more solidly written and less often updated than a work instruction. So a work instruction would be more subject to changes because of, changing processes or addendums, things like that. So for now, we'll leave this in the SOP and avoid writing a work instruction. It kind of comes down to personal preference, because if you change anything, you're changing the SOP. You're creating versions of it, and you have to make sure that all operators, technicians have access to those changes. So here we go. So we're just kind of looking through this, verifies packaging integrity. Yes, make sure nobody played soccer with your product when it came in the door. You compare the shipment. You would want to kind of define an incoming inspection area. That's kind of loosely defined. You can basically say that this is my incoming inspection area, which is your receiving table. Which is, for me, it's my office desk. When I get products in, this is where I come to go through the POs and actually receive products to inventory and print the labeling. Documentation check. You want to make sure all this. Hopefully you get a COC with the product. Mauser, they're all generally pretty good at shipping a COC with it. Confirm manufacturing part number matches. We may have to get rid of that. I don't really care because we're not trying these, because it's a general for the company overall, not just a specific. So here's another thing. Traceability, lot number, date code, and supplier batch ID. So technically a batch ID and lot numbers are oftentimes considered the same. Record lot number or and decode. Yeah, let's clean that up. Because you don't need to, it's basically for traceability. So we definitely want the date code, because with a lot of electronic parts, you want to make sure you go FIFO, first in, first out, or use up the oldest stock. Even though, let's say you order a part, the same part 2 weeks separate, the part that you receive later could actually have an older manufacturing date code. Could be old stock that they found, or if you ordered it from a different vendor, could be older stock. You want to try to use up older date codes first. Now, even though technically you'll hear the argument that passives like resistors and capacitors have an indefinite shelf life, don't believe it, because it really depends on the storage environment. If you're storing these parts in an environment that has a lot of humidity, maybe even some slightly corrosive elements floating around, it could affect the solderability. Even the leads, since they're metal, can be affected by corrosion. So yes, you still have to be mindful of that. And that's another thing that comes into that we'll cover later, is the environment you're storing stuff in. There are requirements for that. You want to try to ensure your humidity is not too high. Your temperature is kept within because each part, we'll get to that when we actually receive the parts, and I'll show you a little bit better. Because a lot of data sheets will actually show you the storage conditions. Okay, so moving on. Visual inspection. So we want to check the parts for visual, damage. Yep, we want to make sure there's nothing wrong with them. PCBs, drill alignment. Okay, so visual inspection. So you may want to have like a 10x magnifying light with a light built in, so you can get a good look at it. So you want to make sure. Dimensional inspection. Okay, here we go. So measure critical dimensions. That's where you would measure your PCB dimensions. Make sure they're within a tolerance. So you are going to have a tolerance, and it's usually, within like a small percentage. So here we go. Electrical inspection. So let's get rid of that. Again, it wants to do that. Verify correct. So with a PCB, this is what we're going to do. We're going to spot check, and we'll run through the process when we're actually checking these boards and doing our incoming inspection. So with a PCB, I'll use a multimeter and make sure we don't have any direct shorts between ground and 3 volts and 5 volts. We'll make sure there's actually no shorts that exist in the board, because that's your first critical failure, is if you have a PCB that's manufactured wrong and you have a direct short. That does happen. That's why I did the Gerber review, to make sure the artwork was correct. Because it is extremely possible to have a via plug in wrong and actually tie a ground plane to a power plane. And yes, I've seen that before. And it was by an older engineer who did things backwards. For some odd reason, this engineer would lay out the PCB first, and then capture the schematics, run them as separate processes, and not use the tools that exist, such as design rule checks, electrical checks that are built in to make sure the nets aren't shorting out. He would lay them up by hand and because it was the old way of doing things. You had to do it. You didn't have this great EDM software. You used blueprints and plotters, and you did a lot of layouts and stuff by hand. You didn't have the CAD software where you capture the schematic, you shove it over like with KiCad, and it brings all the footprints over and creates all the air wires for the nets, and you can do all the routing that way. So yes, it can happen depending on what you're working with. I've seen it, and it's crazy. So we have to verify, yep. So we have to counter away the components to make sure, yep. So you might need a scale. And yes, you'd probably need it calibrated. So right here, log findings, the incoming inspection log. See, now a lot of this, we will have to kind of figure that out as we go. Because idealistically, with proper quality management, a QMS system, and we're probably not going to, we're not going to use a markdown file for the inspection. FAI stands for first article inspection. Now, we don't have to keep it FAI for parts. We just keep it incoming inspection. But we will definitely want to have a log file. And how we do that log file is going to be pretty much up to us. Do we have a running log file like a spreadsheet where we put in like the PO and put in the individual parts, like the part numbers, and record pass, fail, and any notes if there are any? Or do we, it's going to be up to us how we do that. And we will figure that out as we go. I'm just kind of looking. Okay. So a disposition. This is what we do with it. So if it's good, if it's acceptable, if we accept the disposition, if we accept it meets all the requirements, we move it to the approved inventory. In other words, we would move on to the next step with it, which would be like labeling and moving it to and putting it in its storage locations. That's what we would do. So we would do that. Conditional accept. So this is where you have the choice to say, let's say you get, let's say a label, and the printing is just slightly rotated out. It's barely even noticeable. And you're okay with it. You don't, it doesn't look horrible. It doesn't affect the quality of the overall product. It's just the labeling. The text is just slightly rotated. It's not terribly noticeable. And it's not like a critical label. So you could say, yeah, you know what, I'm good with it. And there would be a QA, an approval form saying basically a deviance. I think that's the right term. You're basically going to deviate from the normal process, and you're going to say, okay, this part is good to use. And you would have a record of that. So again, you're recording that deviance. So if somebody comes back and says anything, another employee or a customer, you can follow through the logic and say, yeah, well, quality said it was fine. Here's our report on it, our log, and the forms we used, and the signatures required. Now you have the non-conforming, the reject. This is where things get a little spicy. So now you have a product that you have something come in that does not meet any of your requirements. You got PCBs that are missing traces, that are damaged, the wrong size. So that would actually kick off more processes, an investigation. First of all, you need to look into it. But first you would need to quarantine the products, because they are not supposed to enter production space. And it doesn't matter what it is. Even if it's a mission critical part and your order is going to be delayed and you could have an upset customer, you need to follow this process. If you are working towards an ISO, if you want to work towards building up a reliable company that, builds up a reputation. So the process that we would have to actually write a process or a work order, not a work order, a work instruction now that for how to handle non-conforming, or it's going to be a separate SOP for non-conforming, basically non-conforming materials. So it's already calling for a log, basically 006. So we have to log the non-conformity in there, and then that kicks off the review process. What has to be done? But that is for down the road, because now you have to figure out, okay, I need to call the vendor, I need to call the manufacturer, I need to get it resolved. How are they going to fix it? What are they going to do? Are they going to ship us new parts? How are they going to resolve it? I have to call the customer, say, hey, your product's going to be late. You have to deal with customer. Now that's a customer satisfaction issue. And boom, that's going to cause even more processes to be triggered. And then with the quarantine, one of the things you want to keep in mind is you want to have a separate area. And this is so important. This whole quarantine process of non-conforming materials is so important that a lot of companies actually have employment policies where if you violate this right here and you literally go into quarantine and you grab a product and you use it in a finished good, you get fired on the spot. That's how important this right here is, how non-conforming materials is I have seen companies do it. And at one of my companies, we did do that. That if you reached into the non-conforming cabinet, if you managed to get into it, because it was locked. So if you managed, like say if the quality manager was in there pulling stuff out to do reviews, and you went behind their back and you grabbed a board, like products out of there, because even finished goods that fail go into non-conforming quarantine for a while until they get dispositioned. I've seen it happen. Like guy went in, grabbed some boards, let's just ship them out the door. They were non-conforming. He was fired the next day as soon as it was found out that non-conforming parts were pulled out of the cabinet and shipped to a customer. Yeah, that's how important this is. So we will work on that. Now, do you have to go to the extreme for what you're doing? Maybe. I mean, sending bad parts to a customer is like a big no-no. You're better off being 3 weeks late on your shipping and dealing with that fallout than shipping them a faulty part, a faulty material, a faulty board. Let's say that faulty board causes somebody to get hurt, causes a major problem, causes major downtime. Now look at the mess you've caused. And that could just open you up for legal liability as well. Let's say somebody got hurt off of your non-conforming product. So yeah, it's very important. That's why a lot of companies will create an employment policy where you get fired on the spot. So inspection criteria, I think that's just okay. Okay. Criteria, okay, that all makes sense. Non-conformance handling, okay. I kind of like how this is doing this. We might break this out to its own SOP just because there's a lot involved. And then here we go. Records and retention. Right here. Typically you would want to... So I've seen this done multiple ways. One is there's in the master document list. I don't know why it's throwing things over there. I don't like that. Let's go over here. I don't know why I did that. So in the master documents list, yeah. So it's already showing your retention. So there's really no reason to have the retention here. So one of the things we'll do is we'll work on cleaning this up and putting that in the master documents list. Maybe. We'll have to figure that out. I have to think on this. Because these are artifacts that are generated from this process. So the process can control it and give the retention time. So we could just keep it here. We'll have to figure all that out. What I find interesting is they threw KPIs. Okay. So there's another thing that goes along with this. vendor performance metrics. And it is also part of ISO. So you do need to keep track of when you have a vendor that fails, that sends you bad parts, you have to keep track of how many times you have failures. And if it's from a supplier on your approved suppliers list, I mean, you definitely, first of all, if they're not on somebody did something wrong. You have to make sure they're on here, and that's a whole other process. We will probably create a SOP, maybe even work instruction for how to basically vet and approve suppliers. Because again, it falls back to traceability and everything else. So if they're in here and they've got enough failures against them, that that triggers an investigation again. You have to contact that vendor and find out what's going on. Why are they sending you bad parts? And depending, you may have to actually visit their facility and basically do an inspection, a quality inspection. One of the great things about ISO that a lot of people tend to ignore or don't even cover is basically if you're running a QMS system and a customer says, hey, I want to do a quality inspection, it pretty much opens you up to say, yeah, okay. Customers are allowed to basically say, hey, you're an ISO 9001, with design, 2015 standard, registered. You got registered. All your quality documents should be available to them, at least your quality manual. They should be able to look at that. And you kind of open yourself up for a quality inspection. Even if they have to sign NDAs, not to share anything, but if they're a customer of yours, they basically say, I want to make sure that, you're doing things right. And that also gives you the right, basically kind of opens up the door for, not maybe the right, but opens up the door for you to say, hey, you're my supplier. You claim you're ISO 9001 certified. You claim you follow these processes. I want to come and see for myself. I want to make sure. And I'll sign all the NDAs you need. I'm not going to share your technology with anybody else, but I want to make sure that you're actually doing what you say you do. And, so you got to be mindful of that you can kind of open yourself up, because your ISO certification has to be recertified anyway. It's not a one and done. I think ISO certifications are good for 3 years, 3 or 5 years. I cannot remember. But after that, you have to be recertified. And another expense where an auditor comes in and goes over, they look at everything. They make sure you're still doing what you say that you do. And then you get recertified. And something I've noticed, I do want to cover it here real quick, is so I'll see online these companies that say they're ISO certified, but they're they're saying they're ISO certified in the 2008 standard. That's impossible. That means they're technically not ISO certified, because the way the ISO certifications work, once the new standard revision comes out and it's time for you to be recertified, you get certified in the new revision. So you're not going to get certified ISO 9001 2008. You're going to get ISO certified 9001 2015. So that means you have to make sure that you're kind of caught up to what the new standard is doing. So a lot of this, I've seen companies advertise themselves as 9001 2008 revision, and that's impossible. You're way beyond when you should have been recertified, and then you should have been recertified at the 2015 standard. So yeah, you got to watch out for that. So either one, they're not updating their website, or two, they're lying that they're not really ISO certified, or they were ISO certified and they just don't care anymore and they're not really following their standards, but they're not really certified anymore. So you really got to watch out for that. So that's some things to keep in mind. And then there's other processes, other things you have to worry about, which is internal auditing. That's something that you have to do yourself. You have to basically audit your own system, your own processes from top to bottom. to make sure you are doing, and no problems are found. It's a whole mess. It's a huge undertaking. It's a lot of work. That's why a lot of companies don't do this. But I prefer to build my foundations on this, because at the end of the day, like I said, it leaves nothing to chance. There's how can an employee quabble with you on this? How you can say, this is our process, this is how you do things, these are the things you have to do. How can an employee say, well, I don't know how to do my job. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, then why are you working here? I mean, I'm just going to be blunt. Why would you have an employee continue to work for you that can't follow basic processes? And it gives them no way out. It literally gives them no way out. Because one of the other things that ISO requires is basically that you show that you are providing training to your employees, to anybody who's doing this work. So if you have employees that are doing this inspection, they're receiving goods, they're supposed to be doing this incoming inspection, you have a training log, you're logging their training, what they were trained on, who trained it and when, and they signed that they did the training. And then they're going to come to you and say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. How am I supposed to do this job? That's why I love this system. It leaves no space for those quabbles. It leaves no space for the arguments. It leaves no space for the, I don't know what I'm doing. So it's great. And then it's easier for you, at least for me, to say, hey, I can stay as consistent as possible because I have a process in place for that. And we'll cover it later. We'll go through things like how I'm going to do it for myself, how I've been doing things for myself. I've got some additional tools and equipment that I use here. Yeah, a little overkill, but working in so many different companies and factories that do follow ISO, there's a lot of things that are just ingrained in me, and I just kind of try to do them on my own anyway. So this looks pretty good for a good start. We will have to kind of work on this, like where we're storing everything. Because again, document retention. And at the end of the day, you need to make sure that any of your artifacts can't be modified once they're stored. So, it's some things we'll have to work on, and I've got some ideas and share you how we used to do things at one of the companies we used to work in with test logs. But we're over an hour into this, and again, a lot to cover. We'll get back to this in the next stream, the next video tomorrow afternoon. Pick up where we left off, maybe try to figure out, resolve this, how we're going to store it, make sure file names are going to be the same, because we're going to, like I said, we're probably going to use a running spreadsheet for this. We'll figure that out, how we're going to do it. But yeah, so this is a good place to leave off, and I think this is a lot of information to throw at you at once, because there's just a lot involved. And it's stuff that we should be doing as a whole to make sure that nothing's missed. So I thank you for checking us out, watching the videos, and again, if you have any questions, comments, something's not clear enough, don't be afraid to leave a comment or a question on the YouTube video or next stream, interact in chat. If you're thinking about stuff, don't be afraid to ask me questions. I'll do my best to answer them. So have a good rest of your afternoon, and see you tomorrow.